Okay, before I dive in, I want to wish y'all a happy new year. I hope you had a restful and restorative break, whether you spent it with loved ones, traveled somewhere new, or simply took time to decompress and reflect. As we step into 2026, I want you to think about this. What type of mindset and energy are you entering the year with? Are you feeling hopeful and motivated, ready to take on new challenges? Are you feeling cautious but curious, wanting to explore possibilities while protecting your peace? Or maybe you're just feeling uncertain, still processing everything from last year, not quite sure what this year will bring. And I just want to say, whatever you're feeling, completely understandable. But while you think about that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Aleja, but you can call me Lay. Welcome or welcome back to A Little Atypical, where we dive into all things wellness, personal development, and lifestyle topics. I like to approach typical topics from a not so typical perspective, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Since this is a reset episode, I'll answer the question myself at the end of the episode. But first, I want to give you an overview of what to expect from this month and share some trend updates since quite a bit has happened since I released my 2026 predictions. So, some housekeeping. This may be a bit of a surprise because I typically have a Monday posting schedule, but even from when I posted my last podcast episode before mid December, I knew I wanted to start the year strong, especially with how much trust I gained with myself last year. For January, I want to post 2 episodes per week. Monday will be my usual monthly themed episodes, which, to give y'all a heads up, is all about effort and things relating to that this month, because I figured with January being a month people either really peak in terms of being very motivated, which, I talked about this last year, that it can lead to burnout, or people can feel very dreary because coming off the holiday season high, there is a lot less to look forward to on a larger scale, unless you have people in your life or even you who is a, January baby. There isn't a lot of celebration. And Thursdays will be used as Thought Thursdays, where I kind of want to discuss thoughts that have been on my mind. It can be something as general as, like, is convenience ruining our society, to something as niche as why is lifestyle content flopping, which may or may not be ideas I use. I don't know yet. We'll see how this goes. But that's what's happening this month in terms of posting on the podcast. But as a multi-creator, that is just the bare minimum of what I'll actually be creating, especially since I want to work on some career portfolio updates and be more in contact with people in January. As I said, December was kind of my break from that, since in my head it's a lot going on with family and friends and many people's personal lives, and I feel overall people are less receptive to conversations at the end of the year. So I decided, hey, might as well fall back with the informal meetings and just have a month of processing and re-strategizing and getting organized, because I'm extremely interested in trend reporting. So what I create is extremely timely. So with all that being said, I also promised to report back once Pinterest Predicts was released, and I believe it was published, I can't remember the exact date, but it was definitely either the 9th, 10th, or 11th of December. So I'm just gonna go and give an overview of the trends shared and then kind of share my thoughts on them. So the first trend they showed us was Gimme Gummy, which is a tactile ASMR trend featuring gummy textured products like bendy phones, elastic cheek tints, rubberized nail arts, and 3D jewelry with kind of like a spring back bite. Next trend was Fun Hues, which was circus inspired. In terms of this, it was mostly home decor with bold stripes, structural silhouettes, and kind of like a clownish charm, an elevated quote unquote camp vibe. Then the next trend they listed was Throwback Kid, which is childhood nostalgia, reimagined with vintage inspired kids' outfits, classic toys from the 60s, upcycled baby clothes, and objects like crochet playmat. Next thing they included in their prediction was pen pals. And I found this one very fascinating, but basically it's self-explanatory, which is the act of letter writing renaissance where snail mail becomes a performance art with elaborate envelopes, special stationery, decorative stamps, basically the whole shebang. And next thing was Cabbage Crush, which was more of an ingredient trend, but basically cabbage becomes the MVP in the kitchen with creative preparations like blistered edge, quote unquote steaks, kimchi cocktails, and crispy taco wraps. Another home decor trend was Afro-Bohemian decor, which is a fusion of African and Bohemian styles featuring colorful Nigerian textiles, Ethiopian wall art, hand-woven baskets, and natural fiber rugs. Next is a style trend called Glamourati, 1980s maximalist aesthetics with tailored suits, featuring sculpted shoulders, funnel necks, and chunky, bold jewelry. And the next one is kind of funny, but it is called Poetcore, which is literary inspired fashion with oversized turtlenecks, vintage blazers, messenger satchels, and fountain pens for an aesthetic MFA vibe. And honestly, this one I have been seeing since 2020. So it's very interesting to see like this one is very notable for them now. But anyways, next one is khaki coated. And until I read the description, I thought this meant something else, and I was like associating it more similar to Poetcore. But basically, it is an adventure-ready aesthetic inspired by Wanderers, featuring khaki Bermuda shorts, utility vests with multiple pockets, and basically a desert-ready streetwear look. Next, we have Neo Deco, which is modern art deco revival with chevron, fan arcs, geometric patterns, edged with chrome or brass for bold and glamorous interiors. And then the next one is more of a beauty trend, which they're calling glitchy glam, which is intentionally imperfect beauty. And I swear I mentioned this, that it's gonna be like a slightly messy but put together look. But what they're saying is intentionally imperfect beauty with mismatched manicures, two-toned lipsticks, bright binary hued eyeshadows, and asymmetrical styles. I find that so funny because I did mention something similar, like it's gonna look a little messy, but I'm kind of for it. Next is brooch. So this specifically is about men accessorizing with vintage pins, crystal clip-ons, and heirloom brooches on suits, ties, and unexpected places for homage and reinvention. And then another notable element they mentioned was laced up. So doily inspired elegance to everything from bomber jackets with lacy collars to bandanas, phone cases, and basically crochet accessories. And then they also added, like, I guess this one is more of an action, but it's scent stacking, which is when you have personalized fragrance creations by blending oils and perfumes to craft layered scent combinations instead of a single perfume. Although I thought most people were doing this because I'm the type of person who sprays on like I don't know, because I like fragrances and my mood changes every day. Sometimes I like mix and match my fragrances, so I just assumed everyone else was. I didn't think, oh, that wasn't normal. But anyways, and the next one they included was Vamp Romantic, which is basically after dark gothic aesthetic with jet black nails, romantic goth hairstyles, smudged coil, smoky eyes, and basically glossy glamour. Then the next thing they added was cool blue, which is kind of based on cool tones, glacier inspired accessories, icy blue color palettes, and anything just that gives that frosty vibe. And this was one of the things that was mentioned with my work for their seasonal trend prediction. So it was so cool to see, like, oh, people are noticing the same thing. The next thing they added was wilder kind. So it's delicate animal aesthetics. So some examples they included was fawn freckles, butterfly wing nail art, fox inspired outfits, forest core fantasy elements basically. Then the next thing they said was extra celestial, so intergalactic inspiration, so with holographics, that it could be used in like your home. Moon dust eyeshadows, cosmic, sci-fi silhouettes, like anything like that. And this one was so low-key chic, but opera aesthetic, so opulent vintage theater vibes with dramatic drapery, red roses, string quartets, masquerade elements, and basically the dialed to the nines party style. And the last two are mystic outlands and demarcations. So the whimsical outland is whimsical, mystical travel destinations like misty ruins, naturally occurring spirals, moody, enchanting forests, and basically ethereal looking places. And on the other hand, because demarcation is also another travel trend, so this is basically adrenaline fueled tourism with river rafting, waterfall rappelling, canyoneering, and basically vacation timed around global sporting events. So, based on the list above, I categorized 6 macro trends based on the Pinterest predict trends. And the first one I want to mention is escapism, which I spoke about in my final podcast episode of 2025. And the 5 micro trends that supported are Gimme Gummy, Fun Hues, Throwback Kid, Mystic Outlands, and demarcations. From my interpretation and like reviewing the board, Gimme Gummy offers tactical, playful escapism vibes through sensory experiences that transport us away from the daily stress. Fun Hues provides a circus-inspired escapism, and if you're anything like me and love symbolism, that basically means it's like controlled chaos, a glittery spectacle, and a fantasy of illusion and play, because those are all things a circus can symbolize. Next is Throwback Kid, which also taps into nostalgia as a form of escapism. And technically, nostalgia should be its own thing, but for the sake of organization, I'm just putting it into escapism, because nostalgia is longing. Nostalgia in this sense is longing for simpler times, pre-digital times when things felt less overwhelming. And of course, for both of the travel trends, Mystic Outlands represents physical escapism into fantasy-like destinations. So it just feels worlds away from reality, even though it's here and it's real. While demarcations offer escapism through adrenaline-fueled experiences that create kind of like this natural high and makes life feel intensely real and purposeful, distracting us from like stress and boredom. And what this says about society as a collective is we're all overwhelmed and seeking relief from constant stimulation, whether it's through sensory experiences, nostalgic comfort, fantastical environments, or intense physical thrills that makes us feel something real again. The second macro trend I identified is the desire for intellectualism, supported by specifically pen pals and poetcore. The last time I spoke about trends, I mentioned the desire to get offline. And when I did my podcast episodes last February about the digital world, I believe I mentioned the conversation at the time about intellectualism, and with the increased usage of Substack, even from brands and celebrities, to all the girlies wanting to solidify their identities as quote unquote thought daughters, and basically the resurgence of hobbies as a modern renaissance, this trend is no surprise. Pen Pals embodies intellectualism through its kind of deliberate return to slower, more thoughtful communication that requires intention, craft, and sustained attention, while Poet Core signals intellectualism through embracing the aesthetic of the literacy world. So, positioning oneself as culture, well read, and intellectually engaged, both trends reflect a growing rejection of shallow content consumption in favor of depth, contemplation, and the cultivation of a more refined personal identity, if that makes sense. And speaking of, in a webinar I attended, they also predicted a language learning renaissance that I think fits perfectly into this intellectual trend. So I just want to mention it, that people are increasingly motivated to learn new languages, not just for practical reasons, but as a form of cultural enrichment and intellectual stimulation, basically seeking to expand their minds and connect more deeply with the world beyond their immediate digital bubbles. What this says about society is we're exhausted by the constant mindless scrolling and just are seeking new ways to reclaim our intelligence and curiosity. There's a growing recognition that we trade it in depth for speed because of, the sense of urgency that we create, and people are actively trying to reverse that. It's about wanting to be seen as someone who thinks, creates, and engage meaningfully with the world instead of just consuming it. The third macro trend I wanted to mention is nature-inspired aesthetics, which is obviously supported by the cool blue, wilder kind, and Candy Crush trend. This trend reflects a collective yearning to reconnect with the natural world, kind of similar to what I mentioned before, but this is less about intelligence and like our thoughts as humans, but more about the connecting to what's around us itself. And I will also like to mention that the travel trends could have fit in here too, but I felt like it fit better in the main section as a form of escapism based on their descriptions. So, starting with cool blue, once again, it connects to nature through like its glacial sub-zero imagery. It always has the feeling and cool refreshingness of water. If you are into color theory, color definition, stuff like that, you know that blue as a color is supposed to evoke calm, but specifically the water tone blue means clarity, refreshment, And those are important things in a world that feels too chaotic right now. And wilder kind, obviously, it's in the name, but it embraces the beauty of the things around us, specifically like the forest creatures, aesthetics. That kind of is the things that, I feel like this was no surprise because for a long time we were very into, what was it called? I think it was fairy core. And to take directly from real world examples of things that are supposed to represent like gentle and whimsical in the natural world, I think that's why this adds to it. And of course, Cabbage Crush connects through plant forward eating and getting very creative with how we prepare vegetables and how we consume, things from the earth. And I think this also has to do with another trend that I'm not really going to mention. I don't think I mentioned it, but I think it kind of connects to a trend I mentioned in the last one, which was fiber maxing, because the way people are about protein is going to be that you see like a lot online, like people are always trying to fit protein in. People are going to start doing that more with fiber because it kind of balances out the protein a bit and helps you like process it. And many people are already feeling like we have taken the protein thing too far. So I think that's another reason why like this one was mentioned. But in general, this is more about nature and basically remembering to be very sustainable, earth conscious. And what this overall says about society is we're desperately seeking to ground ourselves. You know, our lives have become more and more virtual, and with things happening in terms of climate and environment, it causes this intense anxiety. So we're kind of drawn to aesthetics and practices that remind us of the natural beauty of the world and the simplicity of it. We're just trying to bring back nature into our daily lives in any way we could, whether it's through the food, the clothes, the makeup, anything that represents like we are still very connected and grateful for the place we live, the place we share. Moving on to the next macro trend I wanted to talk about is basically homage to cultural heritage and identity. And the ones I felt deeply supported this was khaki coated, Afro-Hemian decor, and glamourati. Because all of these trends reflect cultural roots and reclaim narratives that have been historically marginalized or overlooked. So, starting with khaki coated, obviously it connects to cultural heritage by reclaiming the narrative of adventure and discovery, but centering the experiences of those whose lands were like colonized and kind of honoring Asian civilizations while embracing a modern nomadic lifestyle. And this has to do more with also the imageries they showed for that. Like a lot of the imagery was in Egypt, so I felt like that's why I wanted to put this here. Then with glamourati, based on the images, glamourati celebrates cultural identity through the powerful legacy of Black sartorial excellence and basically the tradition of the Black dandy, which is the art of dressing up as an act of dignity, defiance, and cultural pride. And with Afro-Hemian, it obviously centers cultural heritage, intentionally celebrating African craftsmanship and allowing people of African descent to honor their roots while creating space that tells stories about ancestry and belonging. And the reason I say this and wanted to highlight this is specifically glamourati. When I looked at it, it reminded me of the 2025 Met Gala theme, which was super fine tailoring Black styles, which brought this rich history to the forefront, celebrating how tailoring has been used as a tool of liberation, identity formation, and cultural revolution across the African diaspora. And during that time, it showed basically things of the sculpted shoulders, bold jewelry, and basically unapologetic maximalism. Glamourati channeled this legacy that we saw for the Met Gala. It was to highlight that in the 1980s, right, there was this moment when hip-hop culture elevated bling as a symbol of triumph over adversity. And in general, gold jewelry in Black and brown cultures carries such a deep meaning of things like resilience, success, ancestral connection, and overall just cultural pride. And I think by showcasing how much this all matters and paying homage to heritage, what this is saying about society is a collective desire to move beyond the surface level diversity. And I know that feels so odd to say, especially with everything happening in America, but I'm saying beyond it. I think people want on a global level to deeply engage with histories, aesthetics, and kind of like all these different types of contributions, you know? So whether it's through like style, home decor, I just think overall this trend reflects a broader movement towards decolonization of visual culture and centering voices and histories and creative genius of those who have been systemically excluded. this is more important now. And I also think with what I mentioned before about language, that also reflects this too. So we are trying, despite there being some isolation for some people, that we're also creating a culture that wants to welcome more people, as a contrast to the culture that's happening that many don't agree with. I know that was a bit heavy. So moving on to the fifth macro trend, I want to say is desire for color, joy, and maximalism. And I do think the last trend kind of reflects maximalism, but specifically for this one, I felt like it was very supported by Neo Deco, Glitchy Glam, and Extra Celestial. So basically, after years of minimalism, millennial gray, and just aesthetics that felt very clinical, people are craving vibrancy, playfulness, and actively, these trends are rebellion against the idea that sophistication requires restraint. And like I said, with all the descriptions, Neo embodies desire of color and maximalism through opulence, bold geometric patterns, and uses of chrome and brass, which basically reclaims glamour and boldness and the belief that beauty and excess can be sources of hope and joy, which I do think I briefly mentioned about spirituality because I had a whole story about that. So I'm not going to repeat it, but I just want to point that out. Then Glitchy Glam, of course, celebrates maximalism through like intentional imperfection, embracing like more chaos with makeup, more human error, and just basically rejecting the very polished look. And then of course Extra Celestial brings maximalist vibes through like holographic accents, shimmer, and basically all these elements that allow fantasy and futurism. Okay, so when I did my last trend report, I don't think the Pantone color thing was out yet, but that cultural moment was reinforced around it because Pantone's color of the year was Cloud Dancer, which was a pale, almost white neutral, and the backlash around it was basically very immediate because people are so exhausted for yet another year of a bland, safe choice, neutral color, in at least in creative spaces, erupted with demands for something bolder, something brighter. Overall, it just made no sense because you had other color companies. I think the other colors, at least from the WGSN, I think it was like this teal called like transformative teal. I think it was IKEA that did like this, I think it was called Rebellion Pink. Another company, it was like a pink company, they did like this green color. And then of course I think someone else did like this woody color. But what this says about society is that we're rejecting the idea that adulthood, professionalism, and sophistication requires muting ourselves. The minimalist aesthetic has gone on since 2020s, and I feel like a lot of us get it because it was a desire for not wanting to make so much decisions in a time where we didn't even know what was happening. But people want to feel alive again. They want their spaces, their clothes, their just overall self-presentation to spark joy, provoke emotions, to celebrate the full spectrum of being human, And it's about reclaiming pleasure. Like, I feel like all these trends obviously have to do with like reclaiming pleasure in some type of way. It's just essentially saying that we don't have to tone ourselves down. And the sixth and final macro trend I identified is theatrical darkness, and gothic opulence. Now, the ones that I felt like supported this was by the broached up, laced up, vamp romantic, and opera aesthetic, because this trend is rooted in opulence, but in a darker sensibility, a turn towards the dramatic and classical as a form of escapism, with obviously gothic undertones, reflecting a cultural craving of grandeur, mystery, and emotional intensity. And what makes this trend, out of all of them, very compelling for me is the brooch contributes to this trend because of the heirloom elegance and the personal storytelling through those elements. I did kind of hate that this was listed as men's accessorizing because I love brooches. It's my favorite way to elevate an outfit. When I had to go to an event, I think the one in September, I hated my shirt because the collar was so far apart. So I used the brooch I could find to basically elevate the outfit and adjust the shirt in the way I want to, and it just completely changed it for me. So just a little styling tip if you ever want to fix an outfit. Then let me stay on track. Laced up adds to opulence by bringing like this delicate orient details in unexpected contexts. Vamp Romantic embodies darker sensibility through after dark gothic glamour that kind of embraces the darkness and allure. Last but not least, opera aesthetic obviously brings theatrical through the vintage theater grandeur. Outside of this, like outside of the micro trends, there are so many cultural indicators supporting this, such as Adele's acting debut in Tom Ford's like Cry to Heaven, which would be an adaptation of Anne Rice's novel about an 18th century Italian opera, and that's set to come out late 2026, which obviously signals a mainstream embrace of classical operatic storytelling. And meanwhile, while I don't condone generative AI for creation, at some point of, I think it was either end of November or early December, there was basically a viral spread of Fetty Wap Trap Queen, basically an orchestra AI cover on TikTok. What that demonstrated was our collective hunger for modern music reimagined through classical instruments. Honestly, I think it's because of Shonda Rhimes and Bridgerton for making us all fall in love with like orchestra covers. You don't know how many people I saw say they want to walk down the aisle listening to the violin version of POV by Ariana Grande. I think something that's the most telling is how horror and psychological thrillers are basically dominating the box office, while romance and comedy films are kind of declining. So, in terms of that, films like Flower Veil Street, which comes out 2026, and Mother Mary, which is going to be a psychological drama thriller horror, directed by David Lowery, reflects audiences' appetite for tension, suspense, and emotional intensity through the darker narratives. And my theory is seeing horrors and suspense on big screens kind of numbs us to things happening in real life. Because when I was watching the K-drama True Beauty, which is a rewatch for me because I don't know what it is, I can just watch that so many times, never be bored, and cry over the same things. But anyways, one shared interest between the female and the male lead was their love of horror. And it was interesting because they were both going through guilt and shame in their real lives. The female lead was ashamed of how she looked because of how bad she was bullied. And the male lead felt guilt for his friend. I realized I probably shouldn't include a spoiler warning. I'm sorry, y'all. But if you didn't watch it, I recommend you watch it. But it was based on a webtoon. But anyways, while they did enjoy horror, I think it was also a coping mechanism because horror often serves as a safe space to process real world fears, whether related to disease, political instability, social justice, or just overall an uncertain future. Its popularity suggests there is basically widespread of underlying anxieties that people are seeking comfort for metaphorically. So we watch fear played out on screens, we experience it in a controlled environment, and maybe, possibly, it can numb us a little to the chaos of reality. And this macro trend isn't just about the aesthetic of darkness, it's about finding beauty, drama, and emotional release in the shadows. So, in a sense, it is kind of like the first one, which is a form of escapism, but in a darker sense. So, less playful, more intensity. Like, if this trend was a zodiac sign, it would probably be Scorpio. So, those are the observations I made, and I wonder if these are aligned with anything you all noticed or if anything actually surprised you. I think that's all I wanted to mention because since this is a reset episode, I don't want to bombard you all with too much information, But I thought it would be a fun share to start off the year with since I ended the year basically the same way. Now, let me turn inward and share where I'm at personally entering 2026. So, first off, for a while, I was trying to figure out why the idea of a new me felt so wrong to say. I just concluded, well, not just, but y'all know what I mean. It's because it feels disrespectful and ill-intended. Because even if there are ways I want to change and make a big change, it's never going to be every single thing about me. Whatever I look like, however I am most likely still gonna have the same interests that I've had since I was a kid, which is beauty, fashion, wellness, trends, books. And the only thing that will really change is probably the expression of them. So I just like the mindset and energy of evolving and not seeing it as there is no value to my current self, if that makes sense. Second, what I want to embrace this year is just being ready, not in the sense of having everything figured out, but ready to take action even when I don't feel fully prepared. Ready to experiment, to try things that might not work, to create content that feels different and vulnerable, ready to show up twice a week, even if the inspiration doesn't strike on command. Because sometimes it's really hard being a creative person. Because yes, I have like all these ideas, but sometimes I pour so much into one idea that I spread myself too thin because then I deep dive and don't. Okay, that was funny. But I basically keep going deeper and I max myself out, which I don't want to do anymore. Speaking of that and being more intentional, the third thing is I want to be more intentional about staying present in the messy middle. So, not rushing to document things or fix things, but just actually being in it. Because so much of what we see online is so polished. But I also think there is something valuable in resisting the urge to treat everything as an immediate problem that needs solving. And I realize the more I try to force clarity or rush through processing, the more I end up in distress mode, burning energy on basically my anxious thoughts instead of channeling them into something effective, real. And sometimes the most productive thing is to let things be, not in a settling way, but in a way that honors the natural pace of understanding and allows space for things to unfold without constant intervention. And the final thing I wanted to say is I'm learning to trust that inspiration doesn't have to be fast. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes creativity is less about waiting for the muse and more about training yourself to see interesting things that are already there or already overlooked. And I'm not gonna lie, even doing this episode and creating this episode was really hard for me because as I was working through it, I felt like I didn't have a lot to work with. I was struggling to figure out how I even felt about this year and where I'm at and about what I want to say. I realized I'm not disappointed in how 2025 ended. Actually, something that happened was feelings that I didn't think would changed. And I feel so much relief and freedom in that. But I don't feel like I'm healed either. I feel healthier than I've been in years, genuinely healthier, but I still want to go further. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to arrive at some perfect version of ourselves before we start. Maybe we're supposed to show up while we're still figuring it out. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling the same way, like you want to do something different this year, but you're not quite sure what it looks like, or maybe in terms of health, you feel healthier but not healed, or you're just excited but also kind of exhausted, I just want to let you know that you're seeing, and I'm really right there with you. So here's to a year of evolution, experimentation, and showing up even when, or, actually, especially when we don't feel fully ready. Here's to trusting that the clarity will come as we move, not before. Here's to being brave enough to start before we have all the answers. Let's see what happens and stop waiting to be ready and just begin. So that's all for today's episode. Just so you all know, I'm so grateful for all the support I've been getting for this podcast. And to really ring in the new year, I did 3 card pulls for this episode. 1 card to show an action, specifically a self-care one to do a reset for the year. 1 to show the energy. I used the Moonology deck for this because we have a full moon in Cancer coming up, I believe, on January 3rd, and 1 to show the mindset. And of course, I had to use the Animal Spirit deck. So as per usual, if card readings are not your thing, but you enjoy other aspects of my content, feel free to click off now, but not before you follow and subscribe so you can keep up to date with the latest episodes. And share this with someone who may be interested in hearing. However, since I am starting with the self-care deck, you can click off after that because it's essentially just an activity idea. So for the action we are taking to reset ourselves, we got card 42, which is read. So if you are a book girly or guy, consider this your pass to take a social break today and just sit back with a good book of your choosing. Now, the booklet for this says, mantra, I enjoy expanding my mind. Whether the book is a fantasy novel or a work of nonfiction, reading opens us to new perspectives and expands our mind. Get your hands on a book that excites you. Borrow a book from a friend, visit your local library, and ask the librarian for top picks. Or go to a bookstore and browse the recommended titles table. Turn the experience of discovering what's just right for you into an adventure. Make sure you set aside some time to read a few pages each day. This self-care practice can be perfect for beginning your day or winding down in the evening. Consider how reaching for a book instead of your phone could support you in finding more balance. Journal prompt. What was your favorite book to read as a kid? And how does it make you feel to think about reading it now? The next card we got is from the Moonology deck. And the card we got is New Moon Eclipse, Expect Powerful Change. If you want affirmation that you can achieve your dreams and get the desired outcome in the situation you're asking about, then this is it. This is a card of beginnings and there are powerful energies at work. But be prepared. It could be quite a ride, and events now could even be jarring and uncomfortable. However, any new directions you take will almost always lead somewhere better than where you are at the moment. Whatever is happening now is happening for a reason you'll appreciate later on. A new portal is opening up, and all you have to do is have the courage to forget about the past and move through it. You're being put back on the right path. There is nothing to fear. Attune to the moon. Never mind the past. Life evolves every single day. Additional meanings for this card. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. You're being shunted towards your life purpose. Whatever is happening now is happening for your highest good. This is an important turning point in your life. The teaching. New moon eclipses are among the most exciting astrological events. They herald a complete change of pace. It's as though you're being headed in one direction, probably being guided by your ego, and then there comes the divine, the goddess, or spirit, to turn you instead to face the direction you actually need to go. Regardless of whether or not there's a new moon eclipse happening when you pull this card, it's a powerful affirmation of positive turnabouts. So something fascinating I want to share about this card is this is the 3rd time I pulled this card for the collective. The first time was in episode 67 alongside with the balsamic moon card, which I think means it's related to healing. Episode 68, I didn't use the Moonology deck, but in episode 69, I pulled the same card. And in my mind, readings lately, I keep getting for myself, the new moon in Virgo card repeatedly. So I know this is definitely a collective sign. Now, let's talk why this energy feels so significant. Because in terms of numerology, 2026 is a universal year one, because 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 6, when you add each individual number up, it equals 10. And then you have to basically simplify it again, add the 1 to the 0, and you get 1. So it is marking the start of a powerful 9-year cycle after a completion phase of 2025, which was a year 9. Year 1 energy is all about new beginnings, leadership, individuality, and action. It's a time of fresh starts, self-discovery, new innovations, laying strong foundations for the future. And because number 1's planetary ruler is the sun, we also see themes of light, strength, and success. And in terms of Vedic astrology, which I'm still learning about, but I just found this very insightful. The focus is on building lasting foundations with key influences like Jupiter moving into Leo, which obviously brings a sense of boldness into expansion. So both the Sun and Jupiter are major quote-unquote players this year. And then in Chinese Zodiac, 2026 is the year of the fire horse. The horse is the Zodiac's untamed wanderer, which is magnetic and determined. The horse thrives when chasing the horizons, but, when it comes to quote-unquote fences or anything representing restriction, such as like rigid routines, it basically brittles at it. And adding fire element into this interpretation, which is always years ending with 6 or 7, it basically becomes nearly impossible to tame anyone's spirit in the view of the Chinese zodiac perspective. And what's so funny about this is the last new moon of 2025 was in the sign of Sagittarius. The symbol of Sagittarius is half human, half horse, aka a centaur. And it's a fire sign ruled by Jupiter. You see the vision of how this all is coming together. Remember before when I was talking about trends and I mentioned gold being one of the emerging trends? That connects to all this too, because as one source puts it, the sun is the heart of our solar system, giving light, vitality, and warmth to all. Its glow is mirrored on Earth through gold, the metal that carries the same bright and eternal energy. Gold is not just a color, it's a vibration of power, purity, and self-confidence. In a number 1 year like 2026, gold becomes a key harmonizer, aligning our personal energy with cosmic forces of the sun. Wearing gold, surrounding yourself with gold hues, or meditating on golden light helps to balance your inner fire and attract the sun's blessings of success, recognition, and strength. So literally everything, the numerology, astrology, symbolism, and even the aesthetic trends are all pointing to the same exact vibe and the same exact energy. So keep all this in mind for the last card that I pulled to represent mindset from the Animal Spirit deck, which was the elephant. So this is what it says. Elephant, unstoppable, auspicious, wise. The elephant is arguably the most auspicious figure in the deck. Like Ganesh, the elephant represents immense wisdom as well as good fortune. It is said that the great elephant is the destroyer of obstacles, so if this appears when you feel stuck, rest assured the path will soon become clear. To add to the mystery, the elephant is also known to create obstacles in order to steer us in the right direction. Trust this noble creature. It illuminates the way with the light of self-knowledge. When in balance, one pointed focus, generous, loving. When out of balance, misunderstands fate. To bring into balance, trust. Okay, this card creates a full circle. Okay, the elephant in this deck is also a fire sign, which connects all these threads, all these cards together, because read, expand your mind, new moon eclipse, powerful transformation. And now the elephant, wisdom through experiences. And not only that, it does mention similar things. So obviously, elephants symbolize wisdom, strength, longevity, and good fortune across cultures. They're also tied deeply to loyalty, family bonds, and spiritual guidance. All the messages that resonate with the cards. And the wisdom elephant represents doesn't come from staying still. It comes from exploration, from moving through life with intention, from expanding our understanding of the world, which the read card invites us to do. This connection to wisdom movement also mirrors the new moon eclipse card, which is, yes, about transformation and courageously stepping through new portals, just as the eclipse asks us to trust the uncomfortable journey towards something better. The elephant reminds us that true wisdom isn't gained by staying still. And something that both cards do talk about is fate and blockages, because when you look back, or I guess you technically can't look back, I have to look back, but if you listen back, when you hear the things of the Moonology card, it talks about how whatever is happening is for your highest good, right? And how in the teaching, when you're being guided by your ego, right, the spirit will turn you around to face the direction you actually need to go. Same thing with the elephant, because it basically says, to add to mystery, the elephant is also known to create obstacles, which means it will steer us into the right direction. Both of those cards have that in it. So everything with this reading is so interconnected. It's basically so mind-blowing how it's all connected. And to add a personal layer here, growing up and even in my home now, my family has always kept an elephant statue by the door, which is like, if you think about what doors represent, it's opportunities in every symbol, you know? And we always kept that elephant at the door, facing the door, ready to greet our new opportunities, ready to move us through. And pulling this card just felt like a nod from the universe. Basically, it's as everything, the cards, the symbolism, and even my own history is trying to say, trust the path, trust the wisdom you're building, and know you're being supported as you step into this year of transformation. And I hope you all kind of feel that same energy, because that is all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of A Little Atypical. I have to say, I really felt my energy rise while doing this card pull, and I hope you felt that shift too. There is something powerful about setting intentions and checking in with the energies at play as we step into a new year. And obviously, if you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, view the description box where you can find important links such as the ones to my website, where there is so much more bonus content. Oh, and I'm also on Substack now, and that will also be in the description box. So be sure to look out for Monday's episode, where we're keeping this high energy going and diving into the topic of effort. We're going to learn so much, what it really means, how to sustain it, how to channel it in ways that really serves us, and I really can't wait to explore all that with y'all. So until next time, take care of yourselves, trust the path you're on, and remember, you're exactly where you need to be. Oh, and pick up your book. Have a good day, evening, or night, and stay authentically atypical. XO, my loves. Okay, bye.